Hi, my name is Larissa, and I'm the president of UQ Biotech Society. Today, 5 female leaders from our team are blessed with the opportunity to have this open discussion with Dr. Kym Baker on the topic female leadership. So Kym, why don't you start by sharing with us your current involvements that embody female leadership?
Sure. Well, my current role is I'm general manager of Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is a biotherapeutic, biomanufacturing, advanced manufacturing plant using animal cell culture.
Oh, wow. We're also aware that you're quite involved in mentoring people in the industry. Is there anything you would like to share on that?
I think I didn't have mentors when I grew up. So for me, giving back and allowing especially young female students, although I have male mentees as well, that opportunity to ask the questions they're curious about and where it makes sense, coach and mentor and support students through their journey so they can make a career decision, for me is invaluable. And I get as much back from a reverse mentoring point of view as I give. So it's something I love to do.
That's a great initiative you have put out there. After hearing all the roles you have been doing at the moment, I can't help but think about you must have overcome lots of difficulties and challenges to bring you to this point in your career. So why don't we start from the somewhat beginning of your career journey? How was it like when you transitioned from academia to your first ever industry role?
It was like a breath of fresh air. When I was postdocing at the university, because when I finished my PhD, you do what all people with PhD who can't find a job, a real job, you go and do a postdoc. So I'm not sure I was particularly interested in staying in academia long term, but I found some applied postdocs where they were working with industry. So I already was starting to network and make some connections there. Oh, wow. When I made that transition into industry, there were both positives and negatives. The positive was I found my people. Oh, wow. I really go, oh wow, this is what I wanted to do. I was really fortunate during my third postdoc that I got to do a year's sabbatical in industry, and I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to leave. I loved that so much. So it's like, okay, that's what I want to do. 32 failed CV applications later. So Google how to write an industry CV. When I finally got into industry, some of the hardest lessons to learn were in academia, you chase a theory down a rabbit hole and get to the nth degree of understanding and proof. In industry, and certainly the job I had as a service provider and working contracts, doing contract work for others, is 80-20 was good enough. And I really struggled with that for the first year, 18 months. And my boss would always say, no, I'm not paying you to do more and make it perfect. If it works, it's good enough, run with it. So that was the hardest thing, moving into industry, but I just loved it.
Sounds like it was quite a transition from a research lab into a CDMO environment. And speaking of your journey at Lonza, at your first industry role, it was a leadership role in the analytical development management department. How was it like with having no industry experience and jumping in a role, working with people who might be more technically savvy than you? How was that like mentally?
Oh, I was terrible at it. There's no other way to describe it. I went into a management role with no management training, and I was an Australian in a very conservative, at the time, quite British culture. I think the terminology they used was you're like a bull in a china shop. In terms of my approach to people. And so some of the real learnings around that were around cultural appreciation, really starting to go, okay, I can't just yell at the bank teller because they're all shut all the bank tellers at lunchtime when everyone needs them and everyone is politely queued out the door of the bank because the queue's so long. And you have to learn that, well, actually, culturally, that's just how it works, rather than me storming to the front and demanding them opening another tiller, which is what I would have done in Australia, and that would have been perfectly acceptable at the time. Likewise, in a work situation, you go from, in this academic setting, of being the master of your own work and the master of your own studies and your own project and being the best, to then realising you can only achieve as a team. Yeah. And there is no I in the word team. And so learning that you have to actually leverage the strengths of others around you and that of your team to move forward and be effective was a true learning experience for me.
Oh wow, that sounds like a huge challenge. We are also aware that during your time at Lonza, apart from the first leadership role, you did transition to the next department, being the head of process scaled up and support, and then move on to another leadership role, which is the head of QC. So by the sound of this, it feels like you have grown in the beginning, taking up the first leadership role, but also beyond that, you have grown as the leader yourself. Would you mind elaborating more on that learning journey?
Sure. At my time in Lonza, I did 13 different roles in 15 years. And that, I think if we personify what made that successful is, one, I was open to doing anything. Two, I'm an optimist, and optimists always get ahead. Three, I'm resilient. So resilient really is, we all get setbacks, but the speed at which you bounce back and go, okay, let's give it another crack, really are defining moments. I think because I had worked in cell cultures run bioreactors as part of postdoctoral studies and undergrad, and then I had that basis of both science and engineering that the biotech degree gives you, then taking that analytical development, because when you're in the lab and you're running a project, you're doing your own analytics, so I'd kind of picked that up along the way. I started having more and more skill sets that actually made me like, oh, she actually understands more of this value stream that we're operating in this plant. I had worked 7 years to get out of analytics and to the pilot plant, and now I was being put back into a QC supporting operations this time rather than the development group. And he said, how long is it going to take you to fix QC? Because that was my mantra. I go in, transformational leader, look where the problem is, understand the problem, fix the process, get it running smoothly, and then go do the next thing. Oh, wow. So I said, 18 months, give me 18 months. So after 18 months, I'd fixed it, but it wasn't stable. And he said, I want you to make it profitable, which is not how a QC department should run, but he wanted it profitable, and I want it stable. So stable means time. So I ended up being there for 5 years, but handed it over in really good hands at the end of that. And we used to do these rotations through senior leadership roles. So then I moved back to MSAT, Manufacturing Science and Technology, which is all the people that own the process, define the process, and are the really smartest people in the company. So that was my funnest role.
Well, it's really interesting when you were talking about the rotation of different leadership roles that you have gone through. And we also gathered that a lot of times when you took up a new role, you kind of learn things after you've taken up the role. Is there any challenge that you are learning and also leading at the same time? And how do you cope with that?
Sure, and perhaps I'll talk to moving in as QC director. So although I'd come from analytical development, so I kind of knew how all the assays worked, knew how to validate them, knew how to work with them. QC do a lot of testing to support manufacturing that doesn't happen in development, especially looking after the sterility and keeping the plants clean and that assurance there. The other thing is when you're in development R&D, it's really like being that hybrid academic industry environment. When you're in QC, you're in this very compliant state. So I was learning a lot more about compliance and what the regulations needed, and I certainly knew very quickly that my optimistic, yeah, we can do that, we can do anything, isn't necessarily appropriate in a highly compliant state. Add on to that really good QC and QA people aren't necessarily the most change-ready group because there's a control mechanism of how change happens. And I certainly went into that role very impatient. And change took a lot longer for all the right reasons than I had the patience for. So I had to learn.
You mentioned that there were mentor figures that appeared earlier on in your industry journey. What did they do that equipped you on the way? Because that sounds like a lot of challenges.
I'd say whether you call them a mentor or a champion, they championed me. And it was actually one of my former managers who was the person who gave me the job in the first place. He said, I knew in the first 30 seconds I wanted to hire you because I wanted the resilience, I wanted the optimism, and I wanted the enthusiasm you were going to bring and really drive change in this analytical development department. He'd moved on to a global role, and he's the one that tapped me on the shoulder and said, have you considered going for the head of the pilot plant role? And I went, huh? No. He said, don't you think you should? You've kind of got all that background. And I thought, okay. So then I applied for the role and I got the role. But the lesson I learned is that having that champion that sees something in you that you perhaps don't have that self-confidence to know it's a strength yet, that set my journey apart. Only through the feedback of other people I had touched, and I'd been there 15 years, so I knew a lot of people there, did I then go, oh, I think I can do this. So sometimes, lesson learnt, we always doubt our ability to do something. That's when you need to find that champion, need to find those support network that go, absolutely, girl, you can rock that.
And sorry about that, do you have any other advice on how to deal with that self-doubt aside from champions?
And I know you've heard me say it before, Katarina, fake it till you make it. I don't know, whenever you have this series of self-doubt, it's very normal. You're not alone. Everyone feels it. And so just go find those friends, those family that love you, and get them to remind you how good you are. And then you go, okay, I can do this. And I like to share that story where, and it's a gross generalisation because there are examples either way, but where in general, men, when they go to apply for a job, will look at a job criteria and go, I can do 50% of this, I'm going to apply. But a female will look at a job advert and go, oh, I don't tick every box. I don't think I can do that. That's something that, especially as women, we need to break that cycle, because for every female that is competent to do a role, only 50% of them are going to apply. And if you don't apply, you don't get. So we have to get better at being comfortable that we won't win everything, we won't get every job, but you know what? We might learn something out of that interview that we then crack the next time and get better.
That's a very important message put out there for all young female leaders. To move on from your experience in UK to back to Australia at Thermo. The growth of Patheon obviously has reshaped the Southeast Queensland landscape, and of all the industrious subdivisions at Thermo, Kym, your contribution is clearly part of this important development. Looking back in the past 10 years of your time at Thermo, what was your initial vision, and has that vision been fulfilled already?
Yes and no. So the initial vision, and the one thing if I toot my own horn, that I am exceptionally good at is transformational leadership. And that's what made me successful in Lonza. That's what makes me successful here. It's how do you look at that overarching process, break it down step by step, and then where things aren't efficient, where they're difficult for the operator to do. Because at the end of the day, what we do is we take raw materials and cells and we transform them into biotherapeutic products. Then we test them and then they're out the door. But the people who make the product are really the only stars in the whole site. They're my star performers, and everything we do is to make them successful. The rest of us are just, I'll call myself a highly paid secretary that manages risk. That's my job. And then we have all these other support staff. They are all there to make this team successful. And so with that in mind, how do you develop processes so they can execute flawlessly? So when they need raw materials, they're there. When they need samples being taken and tested, someone takes the samples for them out of the suite, takes them to QC, and QC can test them. If you think what matters, what's most important in a process, and then work around that, how do you remove roadblocks, barriers to make it easier for people to do their jobs? That's what I love doing. Also, have a strong focus on people leadership. I got a global role while I was in my Lonza days. I lasted 3 days. I didn't understand why I couldn't sleep at night. And then I realised, I woke up at 2 o'clock on, the last morning and went, I don't know people anymore. It's a matrix job. I love the idea of showing how developing people to a point where I was no longer needed. Because if I'm not longer needed, I can go do something else that's fun, do another transformational leadership role. Now, when I'm not longer needed means everything's running like clockwork, it's stable. So, of course, what am I doing? I'm doing a huge, $150 million expansion just because we have to keep growing. Yeah. And then we have more of that we can then do and create another 200 jobs for biotech students when you graduate. So everything is about transformational leadership. Everything is around that vision. Everything is about the patient at the end of who receives. So very clear messages on site. Everyone knows it's about the patient, and everyone knows we want to do a better job and drive towards flawless execution.
Well, Kym, as a transformational leader, how did you come around to articulate the vision with them and empower them to be part of this mission?
So the vision stays the same. We want to make the world healthier, cleaner, safer. That's it. That's the vision. Yep. When you then look at a more strategic level, at a site level, then it's about setting goals and objectives that are relevant to each department. Yep. So, for instance, Thermo Fisher has, the site has the overarching vision, and then we have global goals and objectives. They roll down into, the pharma services division, who roll down into the drug substance division, and then we have site relevant goals and objectives which translate but always link back to that original goal and part of that vision. Yeah. So perhaps at a site level, my SLT have a goal to say we're going to, deliver an exceptional client experience. Now, when you then relate that back to, say, you mentioned QC department, what's that mean to a QC operator on the bench? Well, that means you're going to get your assays out on time, and you're going to deliver the reports to the client on time.
Yeah.
If you meet your on-time delivery, then the client loves it. So it's the conglomeration, and then in operations or in MSAT, who would be the ones delivering the report, they deliver their reports on time. We manufacture the batch to the timeline we've said it was, and we get it released by QC on time. All of those elements then feed in to that overarching site goal, but everyone has a role to play. So every department has a set of its own, every person has a set of individual goals and objectives that relate back to that site metric that I own, that feeds in to all those other levels up the food chain around delighting our customers.
It's good to see how in a complex manufacturing site, everyone QPI would eventually bringing up together to direct things to one collective goal together, which is what you're doing. And now is especially a very exciting time for any biotech students who want to head into the manufacturing field. How would you describe, or how would you foresee the future for Thermo, let's say in the next 5 years?
So over the next 5 years, our biggest role is we are going to triple our capacity. So we're in the late stage of the design phase now, and then we'll start building next year, and that's going to take all of next year and part of the year after, and we hope that we can release some capacity late in 27, and then definitely start ramping up again in 28 and start making more product.
As we are coming close to the end of the interview, I do want to jump back to a broader perspective, Kym. What do you think regarding female leadership from an industry point of view? How are women more equipped these days, or are they really?
Great question. I think one of the things I noticed, and I joined industry 25 years ago, so the world has changed a lot in that time, and predominantly for the better. I think that definitely, whether it's academia or industry, there is a lot more equity than there used to be. In terms of what makes you successful today, what tools, what are the challenges, I think a couple of things that they're not necessarily industry or academia, but some of the challenges you still face today is that Australia is so culturally and linguistically diverse a nation, which brings so many wonderful things with it. But with it, often women are still being faced with either cultural assumptions they've brought with them, the expectations your grandparents have on you of how you will behave, how you will be seen, how you will communicate. And then you also have a cohort of other people who have cultural expectations and assumptions that perhaps don't necessarily fit with the Australian ethos. If we were to say, you could genericise to say that. That still means that women can find a lot of challenges where they're still facing misogyny, and it may not be intentional, but it's still there. It could be unconscious bias, or it could be very conscious to come across as arrogant and intimidating, knowing that that may make someone who culturally has been brought up to go, no, men sit on a pedestal, to step back and not bring themselves forward. So really want to champion women to say, it's okay when you're in Australia to step up, speak out, and own your voice. Now, the one thing women bring to the table is compassion, leading with compassion, leading with empathy. And that has a lot of value in industry, has a lot of value anywhere you work, because generally we're better socializers, we're better team workers, we're better collaborators, because culturally we've been brought up in that nurturing situation. That's our super strength. We can use that. What we need to do is then learn, when we lead with empathy, ears open. People want to hear more. And then you can go in and go, however, blah, 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 blah. Therefore, I'd like to suggest this, and actually start to lead and be more assertive without being unnatural.
We often underestimated our power in voicing our opinion. We often underestimated our speech when it comes to crucial conversation. And what Kym was suggesting is that it's time for students, for female leaders, to realize earliest possible before they step into their career, to know what they can actually do to push their opinion out there in a kind and respectful way.
And if that doesn't work, one of my favourite role models of all time, I'm a lot older than you guys, is a lady called Dian Fossey. She worked with gorilla populations in Africa in the 60s and 70s. She was murdered by a poacher in the mid-80s. But she learnt more about primate behaviour. Essentially, Dian Fossey, for those that all ever need to deal with that, alpha silverback gorilla, taught how to deal with that. And it's priceless. Using anthropology in a human setting works every time. So handy tricks if you're dealing with a particularly misogynistic, arrogant male, actually play up to them. Go, oh, really? Play to whatever they're really into and allow them to big themselves up. They love you because you're listening and you're going, oh, that's so interesting. Oh, wow. Oh, you must be a hero with that, big V8 car. And they're going, yeah. And then you say what you need to say. You get your point across. Yep. But they're listening because their ears are open, because you have built them up in a way that they're very receptive to hearing what you want, because they're hoping you're going to say something out of it.
You're playing to your advantage.
You play to your advantage. It could be seen as male manipulation, but it works every time. Yeah. So, handy hint.
A female leader is facing some male figures out there, but who are, instead of doing things in a very visible and obvious way, they are somewhat subtle with their comments, with their actions, with their inactions as well. How would you come around, or have you ever experienced in a situation like that in a professional environment?
Sure, and depending on the situation, there's two ways. So we had a pre-conversation, just say, how many times have we heard a male go, oh, have you got PMS, love? Well, just turn back and go, yeah, I absolutely have PMS. It's called putting up with men's sugar. If that doesn't work, there's often, it can be undermined, it can be subtle, it can be behind your back. It's really painful, it's really hurtful. And sometimes it's really hard when you've been emotionally challenged not to react emotionally. My advice is walk away, gather your strength, and come back to have a fact-based situation. If you're brave enough, and it's really tough, because when I've had to do it, I remember physically trembling and shaking when I was being undermined by a male in a meeting in the UK. And we were both senior leaders, but he was doing his, chest beating exercise by constantly undermining me in a group meeting. Yep. So I went to my HR partner. I said, how do I do this? I can't, I don't want to go to the meeting anymore.
Yep.
And so she taught me the trick, and the next time he did it, I said, excuse me, his name was Mike, excuse me, Mike. We get on great now, by the way. Excuse me, Mike, I don't accept that behaviour that you're exhibiting right now, so I'm leaving. And I got up and I walked away. That humiliated him so much in front of his peers that he never, ever undermined me again.
Wow, calling him out.
Calling it out in front of everyone.
Yep.
It was terrifying.
Yep.
But did it once, never happened again. So when you can get up the bravery to do that, we have to get better at saying that's not okay. So it's where you just need to develop that courage to stand up for yourself. As I said, it's not easy, but it works when you do it.
Kym, you mentioned that calling out misogynistic behavior is the key to go, but what would you say to women who are in their early careers or mid-careers who can't afford to call senior position people out like that, maybe because of losing their jobs or any others, or maybe because they haven't developed that confidence? What advice would you have for them?
So one, it would be illegal to lose your job by calling it out. And there are protections in Fair Work Australia to protect that. Doesn't exist in all societies, in all cultures, in all countries though. But certainly in more developed countries, that protection exists. For anyone starting their career, you'll generally work somewhere where you have some human resources or people and culture is what human resources are often called now, support. That's your first stop. You go to them and ask for advice. How do I tackle this? This is a senior person and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. And they should be able to give you appropriate advice, or perhaps they'll go, actually, leave that with me. Most companies, and I'll give the Thermo Fisher example, we have an ethics hotline. You can ring up anonymously and call out any of that poor behaviour, and then it has to go through a formal legal exercise led by someone that's actually not on the site, and generally a lawyer, who will go through that complaint and investigation. So at least so there is always a voice you have that does not even need to be from you, it can be anonymous.
To expand on that, do you think there are any areas in need of support for women specifically in this industry?
There's always a need for more support, and I think, we all need to remember that women need to support women. Not all women support women. Some think they need to compete and squish and push down to get ahead. Actually, a rising tide lifts all boats. Call out inequality when you see it and support each other. Find a mentor, find a coach, find that champion that's going to help you overcome some of these hurdles, and just hold your hand when you need that extra support and extra bravery to do that next step ahead. We'll be there for you. And if no one else is answering the phone, ring me.
Kym, that's too nice of you. But we do agree that these days it's really important to empower younger female leading figures. And before we end the interview, I would like to bring in a perspective as a student. And this year is a special time for the society because the UQ Biotech executive team have gathered a handful of female leaders. Some are here with us today. And I would like to share with you the top 3 struggles some of us has experienced in our leadership. The first one, opinions listened but not taken by male coworkers. Second, differentiating assertiveness and dominance.
When you feel your ideas aren't being taken into account, is to just inquisitively ask questions about why their idea. Sometimes their idea may actually be the better idea. So ask questions of why they've come to that conclusion, and then gently just ask another question of why, then another question of why. And have they considered your great idea, approaching something in the way you may know for certain there's a better way to do it. And maybe there's an opportunity to take this great male idea and combine it, and have they considered that that might be an opportunity to move forward. So the best outcomes happen when both parties win. So think about it from the lens, what's in it for them, what's in it for you, how do you make it a win-win for both of you? And there's a really great book that's very easy read, because I think I read it on a plane ride, Negotiate as if your life depended on it. And it just talks to that, win-win. Find the win in every situation, where as long as they feel they've won, they'll adapt your idea. So that would be a really good example there.
That's a handful piece of advice. Well, what an enriching section exploring female leadership with a prominent industry figure, Kym. Thank you for spending your time with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And to all the young female leaders out there, we hope you have taken a lot from this interview video. We are UQ BTS. Thanks for watching.